Alright, in this video we are going to go through the process of ion exchanging our glass rods. And so this video is going to show you how we're going to prep the nitrate salts, how we're going to load the glass holders that we have. It's going to go through the materials safety and how to kind of practice so that this is done as safely as possible. And then we're going to show you the melting of the salts, how we prep that by stirring, make sure it's homogeneous. Then we're going to show you preheating of the glass, transfer of the glass into the nitrate salts that are molten now, and then removal afterwards, and then the cooling process, and then any post-process treatment that we need to do. So that's kind of the steps that we're going to go through. So there's kind of a few things in this. So I wanted to just give you kind of a brief summary. And so you'll see those as we go along with this video. All right, so we've got all of our glass prepped for the ion exchange. So I want to show you what they're going into for ion exchange. So these are stainless steel vessels. They kind of look like the food service cups that you see with forks and whatnot in them. And then we've built these homemade apparatus that are more or less fancy toothbrush holders, as you might imagine, that hold the requisite number of glass rods and can fit in the containers. So we've got stainless steel wire to lift them in and out of the containers. So this is going to hold our nitrate salts. This is going to hold our glass rods, and that's going to give us the ion exchange between the ions in the glass and the ions in the molten nitrate salts. So all we have to do for this, they're built with sort of corrugated steel, stainless steel. Everything here is stainless steel. It still kind of acts on it, so that's the coloration. And so basically we just need to put all the glass rods into the slots, and we just fill this up. And so we'll just continue to do that into all of the available slots until we have this filled up. If it doesn't fit, don't worry about it and move on to the next one. Some of the ones near the edge can't fit because of the screws, so keep that in mind. And so I'm going to continue to do this, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like at the end. All right, we're back, and I've loaded this as full as I could get it with glass rods. You might notice that some of them around the rods, the vertical rods that hold this thing together, won't go because of the nuts. So I've got as many in there as I can, and it just happens to be exactly 30. So I've got this thing loaded up, and we've designed it this way so that there's spacing between each glass rod. And so this way, when we put it into the nitrate salt, the nitrates will be able to fully encompass each glass rod in this configuration, as opposed to just throwing all the salt or all the glass rods into the salt. You can get some that stick together, and therefore there's going to be a place where nitrate doesn't have access to. So that's why we have this holders. So basically this is set up. So now once we get the furnace at temperature, the nitrates at temperature, we can go ahead and put this into the furnace, and we'll be ready to do the ion exchange experiment. All right, so for this next step, we have the nitrates already weighed out and put into these plastic tubs. So you can kind of see here, this is the 100% potassium nitrate, which is 800 grams of potassium nitrate, nothing else, is in this container. So Nancy's already weighed this for us. It's in the notebook, and I have some images in Google Share that you can find all of these masses and so forth. But now we need to transfer them to our containers for the furnace, and so that's again these stainless steel containers. They look a little beat up, but I promise you that's just sort of discoloration on the outside. And so I need to transfer to these containers, and I've got my nitrile gloves on because we don't want to have contact with the nitrates, particularly silver, and so you'll know that when you start to look up the MSDS and so forth. So if I go ahead and transfer, and you can see that's basically looks like kind of it looks like a white salt, and it's got some clumps in there and so forth, but more or less it just looks like a salt, right? All right, so I'm going to pour all this carefully into my container. There's a lot of clumps in here. And I'm tapping so I can make sure I can get all of it. All right. So for this now, again, I've filled it up. You can notice that I've basically filled up this container with this salt. So keep in mind that this is a salt. It's a solid, right? It's gonna melt. So we did not we made these calculations with 800 grams so that it covers the glass rods, but is not going up to the top of the container. So keep in mind, once this melts, all the space in between the salt granules will disappear. It'll become a liquid, and it will be much less of this container. And so I'll try to get some pictures and videos when it's in its molten state to show you the difference. But I just wanted to kind of show you here that typically it goes almost all the way to the top here in terms of how much the salt covers. So I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of the salts. I'm going to keep track of which is which, and then we will come back and I'll show you the next step of putting them into the furnace. Alright, so we are over here at the furnace that we're going to use for this experiment to do the ion exchange treatments at temperature. I went ahead and put some labels on the furnace door. So basically, you might not be able to see it on the video here, but this is the 100% potassium. I'm going to put that in the front right, and then over here on the front left, I've got the 1% silver, and then in the back right, I've got the 2% silver nitrate, and in the back left, I've got the 5% silver, and all of these are potassium based. So I'm trying to stick to that. And so the furnace isn't on right now. This would be reading a temperature. So this is in the off position. It's not at temperature, it's at room temperature. So I'm going to lift this to engage the lock, swing the door open, and you can see the inside of the furnace. And I'm going to go ahead and place those vessels with the salt into the furnace. Again, they won't have labels on them. That's why I put them on the door, because they would just burn off in the furnace. So I need to make sure I keep the position. So this is the back left. This is our 5% silver and potassium. This is the back right. And that is our 2%. Then front left, I've got my 1%. And then front right, I've got my 100% potassium. So I'm just making sure that those are consistently in there. You might also notice that I've left some room in between the containers. This is where I'm going to be able to put the glass holders. So these little devices that I showed you earlier, right? I want to make sure that they can go in here, and that is for the preheat. So we want to make sure we can get them up to temperature before we put them in the salt. So I leave a little space on either side so that we can get those glass holders in there. And then once the preheat's done, we'll put them into the salt. So I want to make sure I have space for all of that. All right, so these salts are going in. This is basically the night before. So what we're going to basically do tonight, and then we're going to run the actual ion exchange treatments in the morning, but we're going to get it up to temperature. So that will take around 30 minutes or so to get up to the 400 degrees. And then the salts, being a solid, and we have to go through a phase transformation, can take a while to go from solid to liquid in their molten state. And so that's why we need to give it at least a couple hours, if not more, to be able to get the salt melted, everything up to temperature. And we'll also have to stir the salts since we have silver and potassium mixtures. So we'll put a glass rod in there to stir and make sure everything is homogeneous. So that's we've got them in the furnace now, and then a few hours before the experiment starts, we want to make sure it's on. So I'm going to start this up. So basically, let me get the camera a little closer. All right, so hopefully you'll notice that it's on now. You see two numbers, the actual temperature and then the set point. So right now it's at 21 degrees Celsius and it's trying to get to 300. So we actually want to bump this up by using the up arrow over here on the right. And we're going to do that until we get to 400 degrees. All right, so now after it blinks, it'll be at the set point is at 400. And then this number, which is the actual temperature, read by a thermocouple inside the furnace, should start to go up, indicating that the furnace is heating up. So you just saw it tick up from 21 to 22, and so that is on. So basically all this furnace is going to do in this kind of mode is go up to the temperature, and then it's going to hold at that temperature, which is exactly what we want to do. So that's how we're going to set it when we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this off. And again, like I said, once we're ready to do this, typically the night before the experiment, we'll set this up, and then in the morning we'll come back and make sure the salt is melted. All right, so let's go over, now that we're getting set up to do the ion exchange, let's get set up to talk about what we need. So materials and safety equipment. So I have a cup, the stainless steel cup out here to practice, and I'll show you that in a second. We've got a basket or a holder with all of our glass rods, again to practice. We've got tongs for moving the samples in and out of the furnace. We've got high temperature furnace gloves. We've got a face shield, and we've got an apron. So I'm going to go ahead and put this apron on. So let me walk you through why we need some of the stuff that we need. So this first piece, this apron, as you can imagine, the furnace is going to be at 400 degrees Celsius. Different years, different temperatures, but more or less 400 degrees Celsius. So we've got high temperature, so we want to protect our body, but also we're going to have molten salts, and they are at 400 degrees Celsius, and obviously liquid, and so if anything gets on you, that's going to be extremely painful and dangerous, and so we've got this as protection for us. I've also got my lab coat on underneath, so that's important. We also have arm shields if we need them. For me, I'm not gonna use those because these gloves and my lab coat are gonna be enough. So I've got that combination. And then the face shield, same purpose, right? If anything splashes, we want to make sure our face is protected from that. So we're gonna make sure we have our face mask on. And so the other thing to keep in mind is when we actually get in the furnace, we'll want to make sure that we take off our nitro gloves and just use these. So again, these will melt at high temperatures and they can actually fuse to your skin, so you want to make sure you avoid using nitro gloves underneath. So we're just going to use the heat gloves. And so what I'd like to have students do when they start this experiment is to basically gear up. Get everything on that you would have when you're in the furnace. And so put the gloves on, put the face shield on, put the make sure you have the vest, or sorry, the apron, everything on, and practice out here to see what it's going to be like. So for the sake of being able to hear me, I'm not going to wear the face shield, but I will wear the gloves. So just to kind of show you what's going to go on. And let me go ahead and, all right, so I got a little bit better view of the actual sample here. So I'm going to act like I'm getting ready to put this in the furnace. So I've got my gloves on. Imagine that I've got my face shield on. Again, it just kind of muffles the audio, so I'm not going to put it on. And I'm going to hold the tongs. So the reason I have you practice is because these really limit your dexterity. And so you want to make sure that you can actually get the gloves and operate the tongs. If you kind of notice what I'm doing here, I'm using my thumb and actually my ring finger so that I can move them. You might need to use your pinky, you can use different fingers, whichever one works best, but I've found that I get the best control if I use my ring finger and my thumb. And so then I'm able to move these tongs. And so how I like people to practice is act like they're going to put the glass holder into the furnace. So basically set it down, lift it up and set it down. And then after that, see if they can pick it back up and put it into the salt. So basically mimicking the process they were going to do. And so it's good to do this with all the stuff on so that you know what it's going to feel like. So I open them up, as you can see here, open up the tongs, and I slot them into the wire that I have, right? So it's on the wire. And you'll notice that I've basically got the wire at this kind of bottom junction, right? So that's the secure point. And I don't even need to close this. But I can do that if it makes me feel more comfortable, right? But it's at the bottom part, so it's very comfortable. So I can move it from the table, and I can envision kind of moving back here to the furnace. And so I can move this very well around, but I just want to practice, right? So pick it up, move it around a little bit, and then make sure you can set it down. And the trickiest part might be actually getting your tong out without kind of knocking it over. So you want to make sure that you can slot the tongs in and then not knock the glass holder over. So you'll want to practice that a couple times. So imagine this is now in the furnace, and so it's preheating. When it's done preheating, you'll take it from the furnace floor, pick it up again, and then you'll lift it up and you'll bring it over to the container and you'll lower it down in. And then again, you'll want to remove the tongs so that you don't hit it or knock it over, right? Because if you knock this over, this is the nitrate salt. So again, I'll kind of practice it. I'll do it in reverse now. So I'm going to take it out. So I slot my tongs in, get it to that low junction, lift up. When I lift up, there's going to be a lot of salt on it. So I'm probably going to hold this for a couple seconds to make sure that you get the dripping salt back into the container. And then I'm going to take it out and then move it away and act like I'm moving it onto the table. Right? So I just want to practice picking it up, bringing it over, and moving it into the container. Again, getting my tongs out, and then getting it back out and bringing it over. Right? So I just want to practice that with all the gloves on and so forth, so I can see what this is going to be like when we do this at temperature and with the nitrate salt in here. So you'll want to gear up first when you're doing this with everything and practice a couple times with the various steps that we're going through, and make sure that you can do that with the gloves and so forth, and the face shield and apron. So that's what you're going to practice, and then in the next steps, we're going to show you the actual process in which this happens.